we have a fireside chat to discuss scaling AI at Chevron with Steve from Chevron, moderated by James from VentureBeat.
Good afternoon, VB Transform 2025. I'm James Thomas, and I'm a senior technology contributor here at VentureBeat. When we think about most companies, as I've heard repeatedly today in different sessions and hallway chats and roundtables, most companies are still very early on their AI journeys. But what happens when a global energy giant, a $250 billion company with thousands of employees in 180 countries worldwide, decides to build AI into every part of their value chain? That's exactly what's happening at Chevron. I'm here today with Steve Bowman. He's the Global General Manager of Artificial Intelligence for Chevron, oversees AI worldwide. He's been with the company 25 years, is that correct? Yeah, long time. And has seen a lot of transformation, I think, in those 25 years. Here's the thing, though. At Chevron, they're not just deploying AI. They've built their own modular agentic-style architecture that allows them to plug in and repeat AI deployments all across the company worldwide. And Steve's going to tell us a little bit about that. Picture this. Offshore in the Gulf, Chevron is drilling for oil resources 4 to 6 miles below the floor of the ocean into pockets and reservoirs that may or may not be there. And their agentic architecture is processing petabytes of data, a lot of that in the cloud and also at the edge, and we'll talk about that. So maybe we could just start, Steve, and tell me, how has AI transformed Chevron so far?
Yeah, well, thank you for the wonderful lead in, and it's great to be here with all of you today. Like you said, I've been with Chevron for 25 years, and most of that time I was in functional roles, so I really kind of can understand the functional change that people are going through. So not in classic IT type roles. I would say the number one way that AI is changing Chevron is changing the way that our technical practitioners, how they engage with the data that we have. We've been operating as a company and a whole series of legacy companies for almost 150 years. We have an enormous amount of data out there. We have very strong systems of record, but it's also complemented by a huge amount of unstructured data that exists in a variety, SharePoints, networks, you name it. Helping people connect to that data that they know exists and providing that additional context to the already robust systems of record that we have. That's really where things are beginning to change. We can see that the time people spend looking for data is beginning to decrease, and we can see that the speed to which we can get to insights is really accelerating, and that's really exciting.
I think it's fair to say that you've moved a little bit past pilots and proofs of concept at this point. Tell me, what does it mean to have AI operations when you're out there drilling 4 to 6 miles below the ocean's floor?
I would say we've actively tried to avoid the proliferation of pilots. We know that with a curated data set and a really enthusiastic, well-meaning group of users and a super narrowly defined use case, there's almost 100% certainty that your proof of concept will be successful, but that doesn't turn into value. And the thing that we've actively tried to avoid is having those proofs of concept go on too long. Like, all of you who are engaged in this know that the next question is, well, can you do this or can you do that? You get to a point where really it's almost like doing card tricks, right? But there's no value in that. So when we think around how do you actually get it into production, how do you deploy it, we take as a given that we have to link it all the way back to Chevron's bottom line. It has to show up in our P&L in some way and really understanding that value proposition. And then also, what's the data that we're operating on? When we understand those two things, then we can really drive it out further.
Amazing. So real ROI is a requirement from day one. I wonder, tell us about the modular agent architecture. Give us a bit of a deep dive. Like, how does this work in your operations in the Gulf? What specialized agents do you have that collaborate to analyze these petabytes of subsurface data? And what makes this all more effective than like a traditional architecture?
Yeah, we've really tried to lean in the modularity kind of aspect of things. So we initially started off, it was a very simple use case around helping people retrieve the information that already existed within a very, very complex SharePoint. And that ended up being pretty basic kind of vector search was the initial ask. But we could see that as we were able to provide that capability to people, it grew and grew. And we started that journey about 18 months ago. almost 2 years ago. Sorry, that was on me. Almost 2 years ago, and as we went along and as we engaged more and more users, their asks of those tools began to increase, and so we added in an agent to put all of the findings on a map. We added in an agent to then begin to evaluate the findings from a technical standpoint, and there's more yet to come. We added in an orchestrator agent to help link things through, and we really realized pretty early that we needed to lean in heavily on the modularity, because we knew that these agents would be called upon in other workflows. We could see, based on the demand and the pull in that particular organization that we were supporting, that those were common asks across a large number of groups around the company. And so really leaning in on scale, we could see that the pace at which we could scale this out was really where the value was. And so that was a focused effort by us there.
Let's talk about data foundation as being an enabler. You mentioned petabytes of data. Where is this data today? Is it all centralized in one place?
So, data is the ultimate accelerant for all of these AI use cases. Also, the ultimate break in the system as well. It's something that we've embraced in a big way. One of the big foundational efforts that some of our legacy folks went hard in about almost 10 years ago now was moving to the cloud, and really the driving everything to the cloud was a real force multiplier for us. In addition to some of the work that our folks who were working with the earth scientists and reservoir engineers, we made a significant partnership with Microsoft and SLB in a project called Triple Crown to build out a foundational platform and to really modernize the tools that those folks were using, to standardize and then have them be effective in the cloud. That's an ongoing effort, and with that move to the cloud, now we can see we enter into the phase of modernization. So we have a lot of tools, a lot of really great algorithms that are run on small scale. And they were designed to run on premises, but we can see the pull from the business to go bigger, to run these things in the cloud and run them efficiently and run them at much larger scale, instead of looking at one 3 mile by 3 mile block in the Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America, but looking at much larger areas that you're trying to operate on. That's really where we see explosive pull from our users in the business units. And the more of that we can do, the more we can really accelerate the pace at which those folks, we can benefit the work that those folks do.
I've just been going with Gulf. That's the neutral zone. Gulf.
I grew up in coastal Louisiana in a town called Cutoff, Louisiana. It's a real town. If you follow college football, LSU's head coach, Coach Ogeron, was from there. It never occurred to me we were going to change the name of the Gulf, but I guess we have. So
I grew up in the Gulf as well, so it's very hard to get over. Is there processing that's happening at the edge today? And is performance, response time, is that critical to your AI operations worldwide?
So the work at the edge, this is really a part of a larger effort that we have underway called the Facilities of the Future, Facilities and Operations of the Future. And when we talk about AI use cases internally, we tend to imagine kind of an individual sitting in an office, maybe working with a laptop. And we've really leaned very heavily in terms of equipping those people with tools that can plan work better, that they can put together a more robust view of the risks, of the operational considerations, as they're putting together that package of work that someone is going to execute out in the field location. But we operate in very remote places around the world, and that connectivity is not a given. And so that is an entirely new set of challenges. And when you think about kind of operating at the edge, the first thing is just is the system performant at the edge? Then the second thing is from a behavior change standpoint, is what are the expectations that the company places on users at the edge, but then also what are the expectations that those users have as well? So, one item I mentioned, planning in particular, is that until you have to overcome the trust hurdle of those folks. You're talking about operational considerations. You're talking about risk. You're talking about You're talking about managing that effectively. If you've built out those systems or built out those tools in such a way that the individuals who are going to put hands on tools that they don't trust it or they can't trust it or that there's something holding them back, then you never really get to full enthusiastic deployment. And so that's a major consideration as well. It's not just all technical, it's really leaning in on the behavioral side of things as well.
Let's get a little tactical. What is Chevron Assist?
So Chevron Assist was one of our early days. It's a proof of concept that's gone into production. It started life as a chat interface to operate on HSE standards or health and safety standards and helping people interact with the documentation that they need to do their job better. We take as a given that this is table stakes. This is what people expect AI to do for them at work. We work in an enormously complex industry, and the stakes of the game are always higher. And people show up to work and they really want to do their best. They want to be their best self whenever they're doing their job. But the amount of documentation, the amount of standards, procedures, lessons learned, you name it, there's an overwhelming amount of that information today. And so we built out a tool, and we're in the process of scaling it now, where we give people a way to interact with all of those documents on the terms and in a natural way that they can work with it instead of having to click through different links and then searching within PDFs or something like that. Really being able to operationalize it in a different way that resonates with the users. One thing associated with that is we started life with that looking at it more functionally. So all of the standards for, say, a drilling crew that they would be looking at, and then what an operations crew and a maintenance crew would look at. And we realized pretty early on that we weren't thinking of the problem in the way that individual users do. Users are thinking of those things all together at once. They're combining all those standards to execute the job in front of them. But we were thinking about in terms of the data silo and being able to pull the different systems of record where all of that data was residing. And so that was the key insight for us. There was so much value in that integration. That's what really changed the way people do their work.
And in just a few 20 seconds or so, we talked about ROI earlier. Were there measurable outcomes from this so far?
So the biggest items associated with the measurable outcomes there is the amount of time that people spend looking for data, and then the other the other item that we really focused on, and it originally began life as HSE Assist, is trying to improve HSE outcomes at the field level, and so that's the thing that we measure.
Chevron works in a highly regulated industry. So can you talk about responsible AI and inside of an industry like that, what was the risk of deploying this technology?
Yeah, we've made responsible AI core to everything that we do. And when we stood up our team about 2 years ago, we had conscious representation from our HR group, from our law group, and our cybersecurity group. We realized that if we were out of step with any three of those groups, then we were really putting ourselves and the company potentially at jeopardy. So that was the foundation of our approach to responsible AI. Our team doesn't build all of the AI solutions associated with Chevron. We work most of them, but we inventory all of them, and so that's where we end up with an AI enhancement that's offered to an existing software package. We run all of that through risk assessments as well. We're always looking at where is that solution going to be deployed. Who is going to be the end user? What's the data that we're operating on? Are we working on some sort of sensitive issue? Is there an issue associated with the local policy or local legal frameworks? So we're always conscious of that, and then that kind of feeds into how we think of the human in the loop. When we started up our team and we started thinking about that, we really had the human in the loop with the idea of the individual end user and having them trust the outcomes here and being able to verify what the outputs. It was more of an operational thinking. But what we've seen now when we look at the rise of agentic workflows and really starting to think about what does that really mean in practice as you go from information retrieval to more now kind of maybe executing a petrotechnical workflow. what is the expectation of that human? Do you want that person to be functioning like a human shutdown device that's looking at the outcome and making sure that there's nothing terribly wrong with it and shutting it down if there's a problem, or do you imagine that person is more like a referee in a game, and they're constantly stopping and resetting the playing field? We want to be real clear with people what those expectations are, and also real clear around what the competencies that those individuals need, because it's two radically different expectations, right? So that's something that we're always quite focused on as well.
As you've gone from pilots and proof of concepts to enterprise-wide deployment, can you think of a single challenge? What's been the biggest surprise so far?
I think the biggest thing is the lesson that we continually learn around you deploy technology through people. And I'll give a short anecdote about when we started our team and thinking about behavior change. I went out to a refinery, and one of the leaders in that particular group brought me out there, and he said, "Hey, look, we think there's a really great opportunity for AI here, particularly in this particular kind of scope of work that we do." I went out, we're in the refinery, and I walk up on a welding crew, and they're doing their pre-job safety meeting, and a guy introduces me. He says, "Hey, this is Steve. He's our general manager of AI, and he's here to help." And the welder foreman looked at me and he said, "Oh man, thank goodness you're here. I'm so glad you're here." And I was very excited. I thought, man, this is going to be really straightforward. I was expecting maybe some resistance. Then he took his phone out and he said, "I'm having a devil of a time connecting to the network here. You think you can help me out with it?" And I realized, oh no, we gotta rethink this. And it's just I'll tell that story all the time, just because we have to meet people where they are. Everybody's on their own personal change curve, their own personal adoption curve, and we just need to kind of acknowledge that. And the more we can think about that, then the more we can ultimately speak to the actual end user in a way that they're really receptive.
I just think it's funny. No matter how high you go in tech, if you're the global head of AI, you're still in desktop support. It's just okay. Okay, looking ahead 18 months from now, you have 3 different deployment models for these agents: integrated workflows, siloed agents, disconnected agents. How do you see this evolving toward a more unified agentic ecosystem?
I think there's so much promise associated with the integrated workflow, especially when I look within large firms, and I take Chevron kind of as a good example. When you look at the ability to bridge organizational boundaries, when you look at the ability to bridge functional boundaries, data silos, when you look at the ability to really help you with that integration, that is it exists because of not necessarily the people involved. They didn't set it up intentionally that way, but things have evolved in that way, especially in a large corporation with a lot of runtime. I really see the rise of those integrated workflows as something that I'm excited about. Now the challenge is really making sure that that we're operating on the right sets of data there and preparing our data for that. It's I think our ambitions are very high as it relates to being able to achieve that kind of seamless workflow. But our ability to actually turn it into action, that's sort of where that's where the spirit is willing, but the flesh is a bit weak right now.
Steve, this is fascinating. Thank you so much for coming here and sharing your insights with us. Everyone give Steve a hand, please.
Thank you very much.